Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Dr. Christina Bjorndal, and she's a naturopathic medical doctor. She's an authority in the treatment of mental illness such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and eating disorders. And having overcome many mental challenges herself, Dr. Chris is a gifted speaker and writer who loves to share her philosophy of wellness in interviews with icons like Jenny McCarthy and many more. She is recognized as one of the top NDs to follow by two independent organizations. And Dr. Chris has helped many patients achieve physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. She has written 4 books on mental health, as well as created 2 courses. So it's really a pleasure to have you here because now more than ever, there's definitely a rise in mental illness because of isolation, because of people not understanding some of the crazy things that are happening out there.
I know, right?
So
Yeah.
well, so let's start. Just what was your what brought you, first of all, to become a naturopath, but to really specialize in mental health?
Yeah, it really is that one of the principles of our medicine is, doctor as teacher. And so it's been really through my own journey and struggles with my mental health. So I haven't always been a naturopathic doctor, and I have had a lot of struggles with anxiety and an eating disorder, depression, suicide attempts, and then also this sort of big label that was hard for me to accept of bipolar disorder. And so it really has been through my own searching to find solutions that I ended up ultimately becoming a naturopathic doctor myself.
So, I mean, it's given that there's pills, all kinds of pills out there.
Yes. A pill for every ill, right?
That's it. This is one naturopath talking to another.
There's also a nutraceutical for every ill and a herb.
True. And I think now there's almost one condition for every pill.
That's right.
Or is it that they, anyway, let's not go down that road. No. My question to you though is why look for natural solutions? Like why did you go down that road as opposed to what seems like this simpler road of just taking drugs and
here's the thing. I was on that road for 15 years and taking 5 psychotropic medications at one time and still depressed. And so I had a suicide attempt that left me in a coma with kidney failure, and I was on dialysis, and I was told I would need a kidney transplant. And I'm also a recovering overachiever, people pleaser, type A type. So that suicide attempt, I know we're not supposed to make light of it, but at this point in my life, I feel that sometimes it's helpful to make light of difficult situations. And that suicide attempt honestly should have worked. And even the nephrologist said, "I can't believe you're alive." So I was at the bottom, and I can tell you when I opened my eyes and came out of that coma, I certainly wasn't happy I was still here on the planet with everybody. And I needed to figure out another way to navigate this journey that we call life. And the way I was doing it with pharmaceutical after pharmaceutical after pharmaceutical wasn't cutting it. So a friend gave me a book to read by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love. And I read that while I was recovering. And there was a quote in this book about surrendering. And it just basically goes along these lines that surrender is not about breaking out of anything. It's just about melting into who we really are. So we take off our mask. And I was wearing this mask all the time that, hey, you know what? I'm okay on the outside, but I'm not doing very good on the inside. And then she said that that's really all God, this quote continues, this is all, all God needs is one sincere, surrendered moment when love matters more than anything and nothing else matters at all. And it was that word love that really struck me. So, I had my sort of moment of surrender, if you will. My kidneys made a recovery, and it dawned on me that, well, I didn't like myself. I had been at war with myself since getting that label of bipolar disorder type 1. And I honestly did not like that. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that condition. But, meanwhile, I'm struggling with depression and anxiety and the eating piece of the puzzle. So the same friend, she said, why don't you see a naturopathic doctor, Chris? Like, she's a nutritionist, and she's like, nutrition matters, So I started on that path, and then I carried the supplements that the naturopathic doctor prescribed. Actually, it was an orthomolecular psychiatrist is who I went to see initially, Dr. Abraham Hoffer. And I carried his protocol along with the pharmaceutical protocol. And then I had my first year where I felt free from a lot of the troubles that plagued me, which I hadn't felt on despite being on those pharmaceuticals, right? And so, I'm not anti-medication, but I'm certainly minimum dose for maximum benefit for the shortest duration of time. And like Dr. Hoffer said to me, you know what, Chris, you need to use antidepressants kind of like a cast. If you've broken your leg, you're not going to wear a cast for the rest of your life, right? So let's, sometimes when people are 10 out of 10 depressed and having suicidal ideations, let's face it, that's not a fun place to be. But let's get you on some feeling better, whether you can use a pharmaceutical or we use a nutraceutical, and then let's get you on some solid ground, so then we can put into place some of these pieces of the puzzle that really support your mental well-being. And so that's why I turned to our approach, because that other approach wasn't working for me.
Right. Yeah. So your journey, like with the nutraceuticals, so that was partly the idea there is to nourish your body with the proper substrates,
Yes.
so that your body then can start creating, all the
neurotransmitters, hormones.
Exactly. Yeah. So do you want a little bit explain that? Because there's some people who's like, oh no, it's all in the head. It's a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
And these drugs will just bing and play with this, which it's interesting that that's still out there as a vision of how this works.
Yeah.
Can you give me a little bit from your experience now, and after becoming a naturopathic doctor and doing this work, what is it that you can do for people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and
Yeah. So the first step we want to understand is that there's 4 aspects to us as people. We have the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And a holistic approach, we want to be investigating all 4 of those areas. But just speaking strictly on that physical side, understand that there's 3 macro systems in your body, essentially. You have your neurotransmitters, you have your neuroendocrine or hormonal system, and then your organs of detoxification and immune system. And imbalances can lie in any one of those 3 areas. Traditionally, the focus is on the neurotransmitters, and people are quite familiar with the classification of medications called the SSRI medications. But what people don't realize is serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter that is often considered to be deficient and needs to be supported, is derived from an essential amino acid nutritionally. So what that means is you don't have the ability to make serotonin yourself within your body. You need to have the nutritional building blocks to do so. And it was super interesting in my case, when I went to naturopathic school, one of the assignments we had to do in nutrition was to analyze our diets. And when I analyzed mine, the only essential amino acid I was deficient in was tryptophan.
Wow.
So for me, it was like this huge,
Huh.
like, wow, holy moly moment, because it was like not one doctor, even though the naturopathic doctor had put into place the supplements and the support, there still wasn't, we didn't really crack the code on my nutrition. Like my nutrition was still pretty bad, right? And you can't supplement yourself completely. I mean, you can supplement yourself and support yourself for sure, but we always want to, in naturopathic medicine, we want to get those foundations right. And diet is a really important piece of this puzzle. And the other thing I want to mention about those macro systems is it's really important to know what to ask the question, like what's going on in your life, or what, and how old are you when this first started? Because in my case, from a root cause perspective, which is what we are about in our profession, I had taken antibiotics for 6 months or so in the year prior to developing the eating disorder, and then subsequently anxiety and depression, and then the bipolar piece. So I was using these antibiotics to treat acne. But that now we know now there's a big relationship between the gut and the brain and this idea of the microbiome. So I guess the main message I really like to leave people with is there's an explanation for your suffering.
Right.
And we just have to investigate it. And it naturally could be for sure on that physical level, but let's not forget the mental, emotional, spiritual sides of health too. And I think that's the big problem with our system is it's focused solely on that physical level, unless you're seeing a psychologist, right? So, and then the hormones, right? Like, gosh, if you start experiencing mental health symptoms when you're, starting your menstrual cycle for the first time at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, chances are it's the hormones that we need to take a look at.
Yeah.
Every single hormone in your body, if it's out of balance, can result in symptoms of from a mental health perspective. Right.
So I like how you're making it very clear, and of course I'm in agreement, how there's the physical part, which is really the only, from my understanding, the only level that which drugs deal with, and also nutraceuticals. It's one piece of the puzzle. Obviously, I would prefer doing it naturally and looking at foods, because that makes much more lifestyle change. It's something that you can, know what triggers you more, or what you need to remove, or what you need to add, or what you're deficient in.
Yeah.
But when then you say there's a mental level or another emotional level, can you go in, and then spiritual level as well? So can you go into a little bit what you have found? Because so many people see, mental health, it's all one thing, and it's just this balance business. So what have you found as factors?
Yeah, so the big thing is, so when I'm working with people, so I talk about those 4 aspects, and then the 3 macro systems, and then the way to support ourselves is the foundation of health is diet, sleep, exercise, and then managing stress. So this managing stress piece involves looking at our thoughts and our emotions and how we behave and react in the world. And ultimately, the other 2 steps that I think are important is the environment, and then wrapping everything up in love and compassion and this idea of spirituality. So for me, I got so far just on that physical level with, like I said, starting the supplements, changing my diet, making sure exercise was happening on a regular basis. A side quote I'll just mention with respect to exercise, they say the most overutilized prescription for depression and anxiety is pharmaceuticals, and the most underutilized is exercise. So a very powerful piece of the puzzle as well. But anyway, so for myself, I ended up then doing well for quite some time, but then I bumped up against myself. And by that, I mean this voice in my head that was the inner critic. As I mentioned, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So there's always this voice that's telling me that I'm not cutting the mustard. I'm not good enough, right? I'm just not enough, basically. And, that then spirals on itself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by the mental and the emotional side, because what we have to look at is, what is the conversation that's happening silently between these two ears? And who has the stage in the head? Is it the inner critic, or is it an inner cheerleader? And so for people who are listening, what's the balance there, right? And if it's 100% inner critic and 0% inner cheerleader, then that's not, I don't think, very healthy, right?
Yeah, and that doesn't change with drugs.
Does not change.
No.
I don't think it, I'm just trying to think back. It's been so long since I've been on an SSRI, but I think it might lift it a little perhaps, but the minute you go off that, it's right back there. It's right back there. It doesn't solve the problem. No.
Yeah, at least, I mean, I remember when I was in practice, because I did have patients who had bipolar disorder and other kinds of disorders. They would say it's like a sort of a numbing. That's right. But the actual internal conflict, the fight within, was still the same fight within. And their beliefs and their thoughts about their circumstances they're in, the conflict they perceive in their life, doesn't go away with the manipulation of of those neurotransmitters. There is more to it. And could you speak a little bit, when you say spirit, what are you like, from cases, what do you, or yourself, it doesn't matter. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. The difference between me and you and a cadaver is this concept of life flow, right? It's energy. It's this idea of this word spirit, right? That a lot of people, it's kind of a loaded word for a lot of people, because again, they attach it to this concept of religion. And so really for me, that's partly what I mean, is this gift that you've been given of life, which comes through the breath. Like the Latin derivation of the word inspiration means to breathe in spirit, right? So when I talk about spirituality, I'm really referring to ultimately your relationship with yourself. Is it a compassionate one? Is it a graceful one? Is it a kind one? And then what are you extending to the rest of the world, in terms of your capacity to love? And then it's really about understanding if there's, so for my own self, I do believe that there is a force, a universal energy, if you will, God, creator, creatrix, mother, whatever word floats your boat. And we don't want to get hung up on that word, because again, a lot of people come from different backgrounds. So it's really about understanding that there is this divine order and having a connection with that. And whether you have that connection through it can be as simple as a gratitude practice, a breath practice, prayer, whether you're just tuning in and walking in nature, appreciating the beauty and the miracle of life. I mean, there's many ways to enter the conversation, but I think it's important to talk about it, because we don't really have a great way to talk about it. We talk about the word, but we don't really teach a methodology to work with it, right? And so for me, it's the presence of peace in your life. How much conflict are you dealing with? Forgiveness. All of these are pieces of the spiritual puzzle to me. Yeah.
So if we can talk about the current situation now,
yes,
because there's with the isolation that we've been forced into. What have you seen in your practice? Has that that is your area of specialty.
Yeah.
And have you noticed any changes on that level, or?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed, so I'm already immersed in mental health prior to this pandemic that we're in. So, but what I'm seeing is now the patients that I had seen that weren't mental health cases, like say someone was seeing me for their IBS or their constipation or their fertility, or, they clearly just, they've never expressed or experienced challenges prior. Now I'm seeing it, right? I'm seeing it showing up as anxiety, a lot of fear, depression. So it's, and prior to this is one of my big beefs is prior to this, the suicide rate in this country is 11 people per day. So that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's no conversation going on about that.
Nope.
We're not shutting down. We're not locking, we're not starting a national campaign to knock a door knocking campaign to knock on your neighbor's door and get them to come out with you for a walk. Like, we're not doing anything about that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But now, so mental health issues have always been a problem, and now they're even worse.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing, and I'm run off my feet, supporting people, helping people. So I just find that this pandemic is really a virus of the mind.
Hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just wanted to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health. And they're entertaining short videos, and you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Yeah, of the mind, it's interesting because it's the mind, whether you fear the virus or you fear the reaction to the virus,
or the ramifications of government.
Yes, well, that's what I mean, the reaction to, and what bureaucrats can make this mean, and or the misuse of science, the suppression of information, like
our profession.
yeah, like our profession. It's true. I got a little calling there because I dared to talk about our immune system, and
how dare you?
It's like I thought that 30 years of practice would have kind of like allowed me to well, what I was doing, and this was actually March 18th, so
quite a while ago.
Yeah, quite a while ago. And I according to our profession, mistakenly misled people to believe that their own bodies could be, it could matter the state of their own bodies, and if you think about it that way, it's a kind of a crazy situation, because we didn't know at that time what this virus is. So I had no claim that there was a solution to it. But I have seen in 30 years that it doesn't matter what virus or bacteria or all of this, our own gut, our internal flora, our peace of mind, our spirit is what allows us to be more resilient to whatever. So I was like, yes, let's reboot our immune system, and let's lower our stress levels, because we'll be better off.
That's right.
So I wasn't prescribing anything except for what I thought is common sense.
Right.
So I was quite surprised that I wasn't able to speak about that. But if I look at what's happening in our profession, but also everywhere, when people are sharing information, reports that are not part of the, whatever you want to call it, the main narrative,
right?
All of that's being suppressed. It's shocking, to intelligent questioning people, which I was saying, in another interview, it's like, as a doctor, we need to have informed consent. We need our patients to know what they're choosing, and know that if we're offering it, or we're, they're going to ask our opinion, how can we give an educated opinion if we're not allowed to, one, share our opinion? How can we actually do no harm? And I was just like, how is that possible? How can we really position ourselves? And I know not every province or every place, we're responsible to vaccinate, but it's an interesting question, for me, all of that. I don't know if you've given that some thought.
Oh yeah, it's huge right now, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And I think just to speak to what you were saying earlier, the best, first of all, I don't feel that we can outrun nature, right? No. So we want to learn to, and this anti-approach that we generally take from a Western medicine perspective, isn't working. All that's created is methyl-resistant Staph aureus, right? So you're just, the bacteria and the viruses and the organisms, they probably they're here first. They're here. We have to live with them. And it's not always easy, and they're outsmarting us. They're a step ahead of us. We think we're a step ahead of them, but actually they're a step ahead of us. Definitely. Right? Yeah. And so the best defense is a good offense, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. By that I mean, like you were saying, support yourself, right? Mm-hmm. The reason our clinic is called Natural Terrain, because it's all about the terrain of the body, right? So think of a garden analogy. You're not going to, you're not going to, if you want to grow vegetables in a garden, you have to have healthy soil, mm-hmm. right? You can't throw a seed into a toxic waste plant, landfill, and expect a corn plant to grow. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So the body is the same way. We have to nurture the terrain, the environment, and there's many factors that come into play. I mean, you mentioned the gut microbiome. That, to me, gosh, prior to 2020, that's all you heard about in the media. You heard about that. You heard about, actually, you know what? We got it wrong. Don't let your kids be too clean. Let them play in the dirt. Exactly. Don't over sanitize. And we've totally swung the other way. It's really, I'm sure we're going to be talking about this for the next 100 years. So it's really something. And I agree with you that the informed consent around rushing through, a vaccine is anyway, there's, I guess for me, what I find frustrating is we're 9 months into this, or approximately, and we just have so much to offer, right?
That's the thing.
So much. The list is very long, and while I feel for the medical professionals, and I commend the medical doctors and people who are on the front lines, but I also feel like, hey, you've got over 2,000 naturopathic doctors in this country. We're ready to help you, but you refuse to take our hand. Yeah. And I find that frustrating. We want to help, and we have things, I think, to help.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And this could have been the opportunity to really step into that role, because this is exactly our specialty. This would have really been a way to lead, mm-hmm. And to really explain everything, and instead it's the fear approach, and the play up to what are we playing up to? There are people suffering and dying that don't need to, and possibly from COVID, though the test doesn't seem to be very accurate. Apparently in Portugal they threw it out because the false positives were way too high, and so all the facts will eventually surface, but common sense.
Right.
Very common sense. Like, we know this, we know who's getting sick, we know they have other conditions, let's help them, sure, And let's make sure that all the elderly people and the people that are more susceptible, let's do extra help.
Right.
I mean, in some nursing homes, I don't think they even know what vitamin D is.
Well, and that's such an important point, because most people, a lot of elderly are in nursing homes, and are they getting much outside time? Are they really having the ability to make vitamin D naturally, which you can do, but you need to be outside, and you need to have the sun in your eyes. You can't be wearing sunglasses. And I saw something recently, they said, wouldn't it be great if we actually tested people's vitamin D levels?
Yes.
Right. Instead of forcing everyone into, a mandatory vaccination schedule. And I agree, like, people don't understand that there's an optimal range for vitamin D, and the range is that optimal range is actually quite large. It's 80 to 200. I'm using a reference range that is put out by the Alberta government. So if you're at 32,
you're too low.
You're way too low, too low. Right. And I have, anyway, I just think it's super important. And I would love to know.
Studies after studies. It's not like the science is missing.
No.
And at the beginning, it was missing for this particular, virus, right?
Right.
Sure, but it wasn't missing in general. But now it's established.
But even that narrative, we don't know this virus.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, viruses.
Exactly. Like, why are we, and again, it's the war against the body, and the war, against the outside. It's that whole military complex way of looking at medicine.
That's right.
Anyway, so but I think the statistic you shared with mental illness is significant, because why aren't we talking about this? And then what can, like, I know we can't prescribe because every individual is different, and and to really know, you need to, like you said, get their blood work, get everything to understand it. But do you have thoughts on how to decrease that level of depression? I mean, I'm looking at, like, PTSD is rising crazily right now. I mean, I have an understanding of why that would be the case, and I'm just curious, do you have suggestions that we're allowed to do? Like, I don't want to break any rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is what's particularly challenging in the younger children, sort of 20 and under, in that age group, is this understanding, because again, they're not as impacted by the virus, but they're having to not do their sports, not do their activities, not see their friends, not go to school. It's very challenging, I think, for that age group. And so I would just be encouraging that group to definitely you can still go outside, right? You can still get the exercise piece. You just have to do, the best that you can, but the nutrition piece is also really, really important. So, and that goes for everybody across the board, no matter what age group we are. So really understanding the concept of tryptophan, and not only tryptophan, but the cofactors that are required to convert. So foods that are rich in magnesium and vitamin C and zinc and iron and B5, these are all nutrients that are required for the conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. And I have something on my website that people can access. It's called it's under resources, patient handouts, and it's called the Naturopathic Guidelines to Mental Health. And so I list, all the foods in there, and so people can get that and take looking at that. The diet is I think a big piece right now, and that's something you can do, right?
Yes,
You
exactly.
you have to understand that there is very, there's a lot of things that are out of your control, right? We can't control the government, we can't control the weather, we can't control people's responses to the virus.
Mhm,
But what you can control is what you think
mhm.
and what you put into your body,
Yeah,
and sort of how you conduct yourself, right? So that's in your control.
exactly. Yeah.
So I would say, I've been prescribing news fasts to everybody. You just it's
Yeah,
important to, yeah, we got to be informed, but at the same time, do you really
yeah.
need to be that informed?
No,
Right? Like,
exactly, exactly. Well,
yeah,
and to recognize that it's, it becomes addictive, right?
oh, very,
And if you have lived trauma at all in your life, you're actually addicted to the chemicals of
yes,
fear.
yeah,
And so that's why people just love to hear bad news, even if they don't really like, they wouldn't admit it quite that way, but it's like it becomes addictive. And if that's what the news has been, told to share continually, despite the facts and despite the science, it's that you're basically living in an addicted state.
right,
So,
yeah. No, I get you.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I love that, the news fast.
yeah. And I think the other big thing too is, is kind of this can be a danger zone, right, for a lot of people.
Totally.
So maybe, it's kind of like a bad neighborhood. So maybe let's work on getting out of that and more into the body and
Yeah.
connecting, and that's where I do a lot of the breath work. Actually, another thing people can download is it's on the website. It's this, I think it's the 6 hours of working with problematic thoughts. I sort of take people through just a way to kind of manage that your mind so that you're not at the mercy of
Yeah.
of that inner critic or just these sort of negative thoughts. We
Yeah.
can frame it that
Right.
way. And staying more in the present moment, right? A lot of people
Yes.
right now with the anxiety piece, they're worrying about everything. And your nervous system has 2 branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Think stressed or relaxed. And the more you move into negative what if thinking about the future, the more you move into that sympathetic state, which then
Yeah.
causes you to disrupts your hormones and more cortisol, and you
Yeah.
kind of it's
Oh, it's
a
a big,
vicious cycle.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's actually in my practice, as you know, I do bone therapy, but
Yes,
that's the first, like, boom, it connects people to the body.
yes,
And it really allows the parasympathetic to exist, so
yes.
I think, yeah, anything that, and that's where we heal, and it's also how we preserve our health. So,
That's right. You can't
that's
preserve your health or heal when you're in a sympathetic state.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Well,
go get bone therapy.
well, it's you can get it through, find it through me somewhere. There's
Yeah.
lots of it around. A
Yes.
lot of people are doing that, and also, I mean, we'll put your resources there so that if people can't get out, because some people can't actually get out,
That's right.
so that they have all kinds of resources, and
Yeah.
take time to be in their body in the present moment.
And
Um,
that I was just going to say too, just to speak to the PTSD piece of the puzzle.
yeah. Oh
So
yes.
with that as well, that's so with anxiety, a lot of times it's people living in the future, and with PTSD, it's a lot of times people living in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, trauma is a great therapy that I've recently completed is I just finished a year's training with Gabor Mate, who's
Oh, yeah.
written several books. One is called When the Body Says No, and he's created this. It's called Compassionate Inquiry. It's a
Mhm.
psychotherapeutic approach, but really it's about getting into the body
Yes.
and dealing with some of these experiences that are not really at the forefront of our mind, but it's these past traumas. And
Yes.
I'll just sort of share with you one of mine. That I never really looked at as a trauma on a conscious level, which is I'm adopted. And I read recently that adoption is the only trauma where the person is expected to be grateful.
Hmm.
So
Huh,
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah.
very.
Wow. That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Dr. Gabor Mate, he's all about trauma. And
Yeah.
he asked me, he said, so Chris, in your journey with your mental health and all the struggles and the doctors that you've seen, did anybody ask you about trauma? And I'm like, no.
Right.
And he said, because he believes, and I start my book off actually with a quote from his book, which talks about the in utero experience. Right. So for some of us, again, it's not conscious, like it's not, but it's this, it's in the shadow, it's in the unconscious mind. And that's kind of running the show for a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, that's why I was saying, to me, PTSD has gone up too. If you're not even conscious of it, things like, because people think, oh, people are unreasonable, they should wear a mask, whether you believe in it or not. But to some people, they're deeply triggered by being either told what to do, or that other people aren't doing what they're supposed to, or all of this is triggering our unconscious, if we're not conscious of it, inner stuff. And the way trauma works is it'll cycle around, right? One trauma adds to the next and so you're actually walking around traumatized without realizing it, so anyway, listen, we have to stop, but we could it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, well, let's hope that next time we talk,
we're not in a pandemic.
Exactly. All right, well, thanks very much, Chris.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.